Hello, everybody. Well, we've got there. It's the end, nearly the end of the week. And you guys have done such an awesome job. So tomorrow's Friday, and we're going to have a little bit of fun at maths time. We were all going to get together and do one big Zoom together because we all haven't been together for such a long time, and I think it's time that we had a bit of a chat with all of us together. However, we haven't got very much to go of our book, so I'm going to read the rest of chapter 6, and if you're really lucky, we might just get a little bit further than that as well. And then Mrs. P's going to dive into her box of children's books to find another book for us to read. So we've had a little bit of a problem because the Iron Man has been showing his strength with being on the big fire. And then we finished yesterday with, now at last he spoke to the monster. Here we go. If you can't bear to be made red hot like me, then you are weaker than I am, and I have won, and you are my slave. The monster began to laugh. All right, he roared. You may build the fire, and I'll lie on it. He laughed again. He knew the Iron Man couldn't build a fire the size of Australia, but then his laugh stopped. The Iron Man was pointing upwards at the sun. There is a fire for you, he shouted. You go and lie there. Go and lie in the sun till you are red hot. The monster gazed up at the sun. He felt strangely cold inside. But how could he refuse? All right, and he set off. With slow giant wing beats, he lifted his immense body off the earth and flew slowly up towards the sun, while the whole earth watched. Slowly, he covered the distance, getting smaller and smaller as he went. At last he landed. A ragged black shape sprawled across the sun. Everybody watched. And now they saw the monster begin to glow. Blue at first, then red, then orange, and finally his shape was invisible, the same blazing white as the sun itself. The monster was white hot in the sun. Then they heard him returning, a blazing shape tearing itself off the sun. The shape became red as it flew. It was writhing and growing larger. Slowly once more, it became the black-winged shape of the dragon, flying back to earth, down, down, bigger and bigger, cooling as he came until he landed. This time much more heavily than before on Australia. He landed so heavily that all over the world, bells tumbled out of church towers and birds' eggs were jarred out of their nests. The monster stared down at the Iron Man. But it was hardly the same monster. His horns drooped. His face was all black. His claws were all burnt and blunt, and his crest flopped over limply, and there were great ragged holes burned into his wings. It had been terrible for him in the fires of the sun, but he had done it. And here he was. The fires of the sun are far, far hotter than any fires here on earth can ever be. Now, he roared, I've done it. The Iron Man nodded, but his answer was to signal to the engineers. Once more, they poured oil into the trough under the grid, and once more, they lit it. Once more the flames roared up and the black smoke billowed up into the clear blue. And once more the Iron Man stretched himself on the grid of the raging furnace. The space-bat dragon watched in horror. He knew what this meant for him. He would have to go once more into the sun's flames. And now the Iron Man's hair and toes and elbows were red hot. He lay back on the flames, smiling at the dragon, and his whole body was becoming red hot, then orange, and finally white, like the blazing wire inside an electric bulb. At this point, the Iron Man was actually terribly afraid. For what would happen if the flames were getting fiercer and fiercer? He would actually begin to melt. He would melt and drip into the flames like so much treacle. That would be the end of him. So even though he smiled up at the dragon as though he was enjoying the flames, he was not actually enjoying them at all. And he was becoming very, very frightened. Even the engineers who were hiding behind thick screens over a mile away along the beach felt the hair on their heads starting to singe, and they too began to think that this actually might be the end of the Iron Man. Maybe they'd poured just a bit too much oil onto the fire. But at that very moment, and the very second that the edge of the Iron Man's ear began to melt, the fuel was used up and the flames slowly died. The engineers came running down the beach. They saw the red-hot Iron Man getting off his fearful bed, and they saw him moving to and fro on the sand, cooling off. At last, the Iron Man looked up at the dragon. He could hardly speak after his ordeal in the flames. Instead, he simply pointed towards the sun and jabbed his finger towards the sun as he gazed up at the monster. "That's twice! Now it's your turn," he managed to say. The monster did not laugh. He set off, up from the earth, beating his colossal wings, writhing his long, ponderous body up into the sky towards the sun. Now it was his turn, and he did not laugh. Last time it had been too dreadful, but he went, and he couldn't let the Iron Man win. He couldn't let the Iron Man of the earth beat him in this terrible contest. And so all the telescopes and cameras of the world watched him flying into the sun. They saw him land among the flames as before. As before, they saw his great ragged shape like an ink blot sprawled over the centre of the sun. They saw him begin to glow red, then orange, and at last they could no longer see him. He and the sun were one blinding whiteness again. Had he actually done it again? But was the sun actually burning him up? Had he melted in the sun? Where was he? It's okay. Here he was, slowly down through space. Much more slowly than before, his white-hot flying body cooled slowly to red as he came, and as he grew larger, coming nearer, he finally became once more black. And the great shape flagged its way down through the space until, heavier than ever, he landed on Australia. This time, the bump was so heavy, it knocked down certain skyscrapers, sent tidal waves sweeping into harbours and threw herds of cows onto their backs. All over the world, anybody who happened to be riding a bicycle at that moment instantly fell off. The spacebat dragon landed so ponderously because he was so exhausted. And now, dear reader, he was a very, very changed monster. The fires of the sun had worked on him in a way that was awful to see. His wings were only rags of what they had been. His skin was crisped like a chip, and all his fatness had been changed by the fires of the sun into precious stones, precious jewels, emeralds, rubies, turquoises, and substances that had yet never been found on earth. And when he landed with such a jolt, these loads of precious gems burst through the hole scorched in his skin and scattered down onto the earth, onto the Australian desert below. But the Iron Man could not allow himself to pity the Space Angel dragon. He signalled to the engineers. "Round 3, he shouted. And the engineers began to pour in the oil. But what was this? An enormous whooshing sound. A booming, wheezing, sneezing sound. The Space Angel Dragon was crying. If the Iron Man got onto his furnace again, it would mean that he, the monster, would have to take another roasting in the sun, and he just could not stand another one. "Enough! Enough! Enough!" he roared. "No! No!" replied the Iron Man. "I feel like going on. We've only had 2 each. It's enough. It's too much. I cannot stand another. The fires of the sun are too terrible for me. I submit." "Then I have won," shouted the Iron Man, "because I'm quite ready to roast myself red hot again. If you daren't, then I have won." "You've won. Yes, you've won. And I am your slave," cried the Space Angel Dragon. "I'll do anything you like, but not the sun again." And he plunged his chin into the Pacific to cool it. I'm going to finish there because I don't want to give away the rest of our story. Oh, maybe shall I keep going? What do you think? All right, I'll keep going because there's only a few more pages. "Very well," said the Iron Man. "From now on you are the slave of the earth. What can you do?" "Alas," said the Space Angel Dragon, "I am useless, utterly useless. All we do in space is fly or make music." "Make music? How? What sort of music?" "Haven't you heard the music of the spheres?" asked the dragon. "It's the music that space makes to itself. All the spirits inside all the stars are singing. I am a star spirit and I sing too. The music of the spheres is what makes space so peaceful." "Then whatever made you want to eat up the earth?" asked the Iron Man. "If you are all so peaceful out there, how did you get such greedy and cruel ideas?" The dragon was silent for a long time after this question, and at last he said, "I don't know. It just came over me. I don't know why. It just came over me listening to the battling shouts and the war cries of the earth, and I got excited and I wanted to join in." "Well, you can sing for us instead," said the Iron Man. "It's a long time since anybody here on Earth heard the music of the spheres. It might do us all good." And so it was fixed. The space bat dragon was to send his star back into the constellation of Orion, and he was to live inside the moon. And every night he was to fly around the earth through the heavens singing. So his fearful shape slowly swimming through the night sky didn't frighten people, because it was dark and he couldn't be seen. But the whole world could hear him, a strange, soft music that seemed to fill the whole of space, a deep, weird singing, like millions of voices singing together. Meanwhile, the Iron Man was the world's hero. He went back to the scrapyard, but now everybody in the world sent him a present. Some only sent him a nail, some sent him an old car. One rich man even sent him an ocean liner. He sprawled there in his yard, chewing away with his one ear slightly drooped where the white heat of that last roasting had slightly melted it. As he chewed, he hummed in harmony to the singing of the tremendous slave in heaven, the Bat Angel. And the Space Bat Angel's singing had the most unexpected effect. Suddenly, the world became wonderfully peaceful. The singing got inside everybody and made them as peaceful as a starry space. And blissfully, above all their earlier little squabbles, the strange, soft, airy space music began to alter all the people of the world. They stopped making weapons. The countries began to think how they could live pleasantly alongside each other rather than how to get rid of each other. All they wanted to do was to have peace, to enjoy this strange, wild, blissful music from the giant singer in space. And that is the end of our book. So it's a pretty special book. And that's what I want us to do for the next wee while, is remember to take that time just to stop and to listen to what's around us and just to be grateful for what we have. What I'd like you to do tonight before you go to bed is to give your mums and dads a really big hug, because these guys, your mums and dads, have been absolutely amazing and they deserve to have a big hug from you, and you can give them an extra special hug from me as well. So my lovely people, watch this space. Tomorrow we start a new journey with a new book. Sleep tight.